As the evening wore on, some of Martine's friends began to feel tired and at around 2 a.m. decided to go back to their flats. Martine wasn't ready to go home just yet and wanted to stay out and have more fun. CCTV shows Martine and Farouk leaving the club together at between 2 and 3 a.m, getting into a taxi to apparently go to another nightclub. At that point, they were no more than a mile from the basement where a horrific discovery would be made just 2 days later. This is Red Rum, a podcast focusing on the true victims of crime. Martine Vick Magnuson. Martine Vick Magnuson was born in the early hours of a cold winter's day on the 6th of February 1985 to Christine and Odd Petter Magnuson. This was after a high-speed road trip to the local hospital. Kristen's contractions were so regular and close together that Odd Petter was worried that his wife would give birth on the journey to the hospital. So he broke the speed limit and drove through a roadblock that had been set up because of an accident on the motorway. He arrived at the hospital with minutes to spare. Martine was born 3 minutes after they arrived, the second child of the Magnuson family. After the successful birth, the three returned to their home in Nesøya to be greeted by her brother, Magnus, and her grandmother, who welcomed her with open arms. Nesøya, a small island in the region of Asker, is known locally for its celebrity and financial sector residents and the wealth that brings to the region. It is linked to the mainland by a bridge. Much of the island to the east is a beautiful nature reserve. Nesøya was a wonderful place for a child to grow up, with plenty of activities throughout the year. The Magnussons were a successful family, with Odd Petter working as an IT marketing manager, whilst also running a small family business making ski sledges. The children in the neighbourhood tended to know each other and spent hours playing together, so Martine grew into a sociable and very active person, constantly needing to be on the move and experiencing new things. She dreamed of becoming prima ballerina and practiced, but after a good few years of learning and training, she realised that her dream was actually seemingly unattainable, and so, always mature for her age, she found a new passion. This time, handball. Martine soon became the top scorer on her team. As time went on, Martine also found great joy in horses and horseback riding. The idyllic childhood continued. The Magnussons had a third child, so Martine now had a younger sister as well, Matilda. The pair were friends as much as they were sisters. They loved doing things together and chatting about their latest experiences. They enjoyed wonderful summer holidays at their grandparents', and in 1998, the entire family went on a round-the-world trip, where Martine began to develop an appetite for travel and different cultures. As the three children grew up together, they became increasingly close and relied on each other for friendship and fun. Martine was the most extroverted of the three, always making the other children and her parents laugh with her clowning and joking around. Her father describes her as someone who could lift any sort of atmosphere. She was pure sunshine. A close friend described her as so funny all the time. She always made people laugh. She was so happy. Everyone liked her. She was always letting me know what she thought. She was honest. You could trust her. She was gentle and generous. Everyone seemed to like her, and she had the ability to make others feel special by chatting about their interests and hobbies, and had what Norwegians describe as an inner light that shines from you. She developed warm and intense friendships with those around her. Martine had blonde hair and hazel green eyes. She stood at around 5 feet 4 inches and was described by those who knew her as beautiful. While she was popular and seemed to get on with both girls and boys, She never had a serious romantic relationship. She often threw dinner parties in the beach hut her family owned, and often used these occasions as a chance to show off her culinary skills, making recipes her mother had taught her. At the same time, she worked part-time as a cleaner and then, in 2004, began working at a number of clothing outlets near her parents' home. As far as a full-time career was concerned, Martine initially had an ambition to go to medical school but didn't achieve the grades she needed. She was determined to continue studying and working hard so that eventually she would be able to improve her grades and move on. After a while considering her options, Martine decided she needed a change, which included international travel to follow many of her friends and move to the UK for a period. She wanted to do a business degree and wanted to be in London because of its diverse population and her interest in meeting people from different backgrounds. London is well known for being a vibrant place for younger people to live the early part of their lives, and as well as a cultural and historic centre, it offers great nightlife. Martine would enjoy all its many aspects, and so she enrolled at Regent's Business School in Regent's Park to study international business relations starting in September of 2007. Martine moved into a lively, thriving shared accommodation block she rented with a number of other students, and she built close friendships with them. They even had a rule designed to ensure the safety of the women who lived in the flat. If you were going to be out all night, just make sure you text to let us know that you're safe. Martine became popular with her fellow classmates, and they would often go out in the evenings, visiting nightclubs, theatres and bars. She loved to have fun, but was also a hard-working student and took her studies very seriously. In the same class as her at business school was a shy and friendly young man called Farouk Abdullah. He was described by his fellow students as someone who seemed very nice who wouldn't hurt a fly. If he scratched your car by mistake, he was the sort of person who would leave his name. Martine seemed to get on well with Farouk. They became good friends, talking all the time on the social networking site MSN and through BlackBerry messaging, both popular back in 2008. They also connected on Facebook and spent an increasing amount of time together. Martine described Farouk as such a nice guy, he's so funny. The other students on the course thought that Farouk had a crush on Martine, but importantly, her friends maintain Martine and Farouk were never romantically involved, at least as far as Martine was concerned. She was still that young woman who had never had a serious long-term boyfriend and seemed to want to keep it that way unless the right person came along. Farouk was the son of a Yemen-based billionaire business entrepreneur called Shahir Abdullah. The Shahir Trading Company Limited, founded by Farouk's father, was a trading and industrial group regionally based in Yemen and carried out a wide range of activities and interests in a variety of countries in the Middle East and Africa. Shahir was known as the King of Sugar in Yemen and held considerable political influence. As a child, Farouk attended the Azal Hada primary school in Yemen before spending a considerable amount of time as a resident in the UK. Later, he would also spend time in the US and eventually gained a US passport. Due to the wealth of his family, whilst at the Regent's Business School, he was able to rent a £600 a week flat in Great Portland Street, right in the centre of London, with excellent access to the city. He enjoyed the social life and all the partying that London provided, and although coming from a strict Islamic background, he drank, smoked, and described himself as agnostic, leading his father to caution him that he should stop the partying and start to get serious with his studies, because he needed to be prepared to take over the business. Meanwhile, he began studying alongside his party lifestyle and formed a solid friendship with Martine. Martine also enjoyed London's nightlife and was known as a, quote, party girl after she was papped attending the most fashionable international London nightclubs. In reality, however, although Martine did like to go out with her friends, she was not necessarily a quote party girl. She was careful with money and supported herself with part-time jobs. She had no problem working hard and would juggle working in clothes shops and working hard on her studies. She was also known to be streetwise and was always careful about going out at night. She would always stick to the rule of texting her housemates to let them know if she was staying out for the night. On Thursday, the 13th of March 2008, it was the end of term at the Regent's Business School, so Martine and her fellow students wanted to celebrate. Martine had achieved top place in her studies, with the highest marks for the exams that year. She and a group of her friends from class decided to celebrate by going out that evening to an exclusive nightclub called Maddox in the heart of London's Mayfair. The Maddox Club describes itself as a private members club in the heart of Mayfair that has offered London a boutique sanctuary in which to party since 2007. Maddox Club has firmly built a loyal base of discerning late-night partygoers who gravitate to the elusive and seen but not heard green room, accessible and pardoned by certain Maddox Club personalities. The club was frequented by the rich and famous and is still today seen as one of London's most exclusive places to party, attracting everyone from Pharrell Williams to Keira Knightley. It was also an expensive place to go for a celebration. Farouk was amongst the group of friends who went out to celebrate with Martine. Pictures taken at the club during the evening show Martine having a great time, and then, later on, one shows her leaning on Farouk with her arm around him, looking as though she might be a bit drunk. Farouk's facial expression is humourless, tight-lipped, expressionless, and his eyes are looking straight at the camera whilst he's holding the neck of a beer bottle. As the evening wore on, some of Martine's friends began to feel tired and at about 2 a.m. decided to go back to their flats. Martine wasn't ready to go home just yet and wanted to stay out and have more fun. CCTV shows Martine and Farouk leaving the club together at between 2 and 3 a.m. and getting into a taxi, apparently to go to another nightclub. At the time, they were no more than a mile from the basement where a horrific discovery would be made just 2 days later. Meanwhile, back at her flat, Martine's housemates were beginning to become worried about where she might have gotten to. Martine had not texted in to let them know she was okay. This would have been more difficult than usual because Martine had lost her mobile phone about a week before. Even so, she could have borrowed Farouk's if she was still with him. It was expected that she keep her friends updated. It wasn't long before that worry turned to panic, and Martine's friends decided to contact both Martine and Farouk on Facebook. If Martine was with Farouk, he could ask her to call in, or he could even tell them that she was all right. However, as they logged onto Facebook and clicked onto Farouk's profile, they noticed something strange. Farouk had updated his status to say home alone. This was curious because they knew Martine had left Maddox with Farouk, so where could she be if she wasn't with him? Without wasting a moment more, the friends began to call round to all of Martine's other friends to try and find her. This went on for hours, and the darkness of the evening soon turned to cold light, and the worry increased. A Facebook page was quickly set up to gather information on Martine's possible whereabouts. The group of friends went back to Maddox and handed out flyers to passers-by, as well as to any local residents asking for information, but still they got nothing. By Saturday the 15th of March, there was still no word from or about Martine, and the group of friends were so worried that they decided it was time to call the police and report her missing. Although the police initially thought there was no cause for concern, officers were still sent to Farouk's flat at 222 Great Portland Street. It was at this point that Martine's flatmates decided to contact the Magnuson family to tell them that Martine was missing. At Great Portland Street, the police found evidence that gave them grounds to investigate further. They knocked on the door and waited, but after some time and no answer, they decided to check inside. They discovered that Farouk was nowhere to be seen, and on further investigation, discovered that the flat had been completely abandoned, with Farouk's phone, bag, wallet, and even passport missing. The officers also found items of Martine's clothing and personal possessions scattered around the flat. Her snakeskin shoes, a Marc Jacobs handbag, a Guess watch, and one of a pair of Christian Dior earrings, as well as her jeans, were all found inside the flat. Officers continued searching the building, and one noticed a small trail of blood droplets leading away from the flat and down towards the basement. Once there, the officers tried the door, but it was locked. Moments later, they used full force and smashed down the basement door. Inside, they discovered what looked like an arm sticking out of a pile of building rubble. Underneath, they confirmed, lay the body of Martine Vick Magnuson. She had been covered with building rubble in what they considered to be an attempt to hide her body. It was clear there had been a violent struggle. There were severe lacerations all over Martine's partially clothed body. Her head was covered in blood, and there were marks across her neck. Martine had clearly fought hard to fight off her attacker, but had unfortunately lost that battle. Once Martine's body had been discovered, the police immediately appealed for a, quote, man of Arab appearance who Martine was believed to have left the club with to come forward. No names were released at this time, but even at that early stage of the investigation, it was clear to detectives that Farouk knew he was a suspect. By the time investigators looked into his activity from the night of the murder, Farouk had already left the country. He'd boarded a flight at London Heathrow bound for Cairo, claiming that he had an urgent family business to attend. From there, it is believed Farouk travelled by his father's private jet to Sana'a, Yemen's capital. They also discovered that he had erased his Facebook page. Meanwhile, Martine's family had flown into London the following day, Sunday. They were met at the airport by detectives from Scotland Yard and were taken straight to the police station and asked to wait in a room. In that room, in a foreign country, the family were told that a body, found in the basement of 222 Great Portland Place, was believed to be that of Martine, their dear daughter and sister. Next door to Martine's family, in a different room at the police station, Martine's friends were gathered. Once the news had been given to Martine's parents, the senior investigating officer went to see them and gave them the same grave news. They could not believe what they had heard. Some broke down and some were in disbelief. For the Magnusons, the next few days, weeks, months and years would be traumatic. Initially, they were taken to the Grosvenor Hotel, and on the following Tuesday, Odd Petter went to identify his daughter's body. He was warned he might notice bruising on her face. There was discoloration of her skin across the bridge of her nose caused by attempts to fight off the rapist. Odd Petter said that when he saw her, she still had eyeshadow on and still looked very much like herself. He gently stroked her cheek with his fingers. Farouk remained the main and only suspect. In the first few days of the inquiry, codenamed Operation De Bruce, it soon became apparent to Detective Chief Inspector Jessica Wadsworth that the evidence all pointed in one direction. Quote, very quickly, we knew who we wanted to speak to. DCI Jessica Wadsworth spoke to Farouk's father over the telephone. He, at that time, claimed to have no knowledge of his son's whereabouts. He said he would contact his lawyers and they would get in touch, and that's the last communication we had with him, unquote. Just over a week after the murder, it was reported that Farouk had appeared at the offices of his lawyer seeking legal assistance. Later, the lawyer would say that Farouk could be questioned by British authorities as long as it took place in Yemen. On the 30th of March, Farouk was publicly named as a suspect by the Metropolitan Police and listed as wanted on Scotland Yard's website. In Yemen, the local newspapers printed a statement issued by Farouk's uncle through a third party, in which it was said that they would not associate themselves with any member of the family connected with any wrongdoing. The problem for British police was that without an extradition treaty with Yemen, it would require diplomatic cooperation for officers from Scotland Yard to travel to Yemen to question Farouk. They could not hold any trial in Yemen, as under Yemeni law, if found guilty, the sentence could result in the death penalty, which still existed in Yemeni law. In any case, Yemeni culture dictated that justice is a family affair rather than a matter for the state. Farouk could be sheltered for months, even years, as long as his family had the funds to maintain him. Meanwhile, back in the UK, the coroner's inquest was happening at Westminster's Coroner Court. The forensic pathologist, Dr. Nathaniel Carey, reported that the victim of the attack had sustained 43 substantial injuries to her head, neck, and body. Toxicology tests confirmed she had consumed 130 milligrams of alcohol and a small amount of cocaine, but this could be considered consistent with any weekend drinker and recreational user. It was clear that Martine had been conscious at the time she was raped. The mark across her neck that had been of particular note for the police when she was found was consistent with compression. She had been pinned down to the floor by an object, a hand or a foot, the inquest heard, and then strangled with abrasions found across her head, neck, and face, as well as her body, which were inflicted as she fought off an attacker. The local Arab media in Yemen failed to report that the son of one of the country's richest men, Shahir Abdullah, was wanted for questioning regarding the death of Martine. Shahir then consulted London-based law firm Peter & Peters, experts in extradition law. They would be called on extensively by the Abdullah family in the coming years. Despite the fact Farouk had fled back to his homeland and was protected by his family, attempts to get him to return to the UK for trial, either voluntarily or through legal extradition, had continued. The British police sent their evidence to the Crown Prosecution Service, which, once it had been reviewed, provided sufficient evidence to prosecute Farouk for Martine's murder. A European arrest warrant was issued for Farouk. In December 2008, an extradition request was sent to Yemen, but by the next February, it had been formally denied by Yemen. Martine's father said, "In today's globalized world, you cannot hide forever from the oldest and most serious crime known to man, the rape and murder of a woman. I appeal to you to return to the UK to assist the police in finding out what happened to Martine. I regard you as a coward unless you take responsibility for your actions." In parallel with the efforts of the police, there had also been a public movement in Norway through both the Magnussen family and the Foundation for Justice for Martine, seeking to publicise the case and put pressure on politicians to act to challenge Yemen to extradite Farouk. Between 1,000 and 2,000 people held a torchlight parade for Martine, demanding more action from the Norwegian government to get Farouk extradited. The then Foreign Minister, Jonas Gahr Støre, who had been criticised for not doing enough to get Farouk extradited, met Martine's friends, who delivered a 27,000 signature petition. The group demanded that the Norwegian authorities apply greater political pressure on the Yemenis to get a possible solution to the case. The US even became involved because Farouk held American citizenship. In June, Martine's family hosted a remembrance event at Regent's College. They unveiled a tree planted in her memory, and Martine's father paid tribute to the Metropolitan Police. He said that he found the whole process slow and frustrating, but that he had nothing but praise for Scotland Yard and the British authorities. And at this stage, he also focused on campaigning to change the law that allows someone to simply walk away from a crime of rape and murder. In October of 2014, the Martine Foundation made and launched a video, Is This Fair?, in both Arabic and English, exploring the legal aspects of the case. Another civil lawsuit for damages was filed in the UK against Farouk Abdullah by all members of the Magnuson family. So far, these efforts have failed to bring Farouk to the UK for questioning. In fact, Farouk is free in Yemen and is now married. He is living out his life freely, unlike Martine. Odd Petter Magnusson summed up the situation in an interview he gave to the Guardian newspaper. This is not a question of lack of extradition treaties. It's a simple matter of right and wrong. This has nothing to do with moral obligation. People are dying every day throughout the world, but what makes this tragedy challenging to us is that this is not a natural catastrophe. This particular tragedy, in this case, comes from the worst motivation a human can have, to kill a person, to put yourself as judge over their life, to take that life away because it suits you. This is beyond excuse. That is beyond comprehension. And he can just lie by the pool in Yemen and live happily ever after. What sort of a father would I be if I didn't do everything I could to prevent this happening to other children?